Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me. And if you have watched my channel before, you will know that I love a good DIY. We can make this ourselves, surely. Surely we can make this. We don't have to buy the exact dies or something, you know. And so I have this set here, and this is what inspired me. This is the Borders and Trims by Elizabeth Craft Designs. I purchased this. I was so excited about it. I used it once, and then I lost it. I lost it, and I couldn't find it for the longest time. Now, I have a tiny space, so it's hard to lose things, but I did manage to. Then I found it whilst I was cleaning. It had fallen down the back, and so I'm excited to finally do the idea that I had, or one of the ideas that I had when I thought about purchasing this. So I'm going to get these couple of wavy ones out here. Now, something I love about this one is that it cuts out the actual border, if you know what I mean. Rather than just cutting one singular line, it actually cuts out the border. That's sort of tricky to explain, but that's one thing I love. However, as usual, you can do this with no border dies or other border dies. So you'll see as we go along, I want to make some cakes. Now, I have some brown vintage photo distress oxide ink. I have a cute little dotty stencil here that is joined up by some little lines. I want to make the cake bases first, and it's going to be a chocolatey one. I thought giving them a little bit of texture would be fun as well. So just not quite so plain. You could also make these, fun colours, random colours as well. But this is going to be a little 3-tiered cake that we are going to make using no specific cake dies at all. And we're going to get a bit nifty with the stand and all sorts of things to use what we have. But we don't actually have the right things. But there's no such thing as that. So we can make anything work. Right, and then I'm just finding a couple of other little stencils that are going to sort of work for just some nondescript pattern, something that's not too standoutish, but just provides a little bit of texture, so a little bit of color. So I'm just using up a few scrap pieces of paper, putting down some shades of brown. Doesn't have to be the same, doesn't have to be perfect, and I don't need the blending to be smooth. I'm actually going to make 3 of these cards, and that's why I'm making such big pieces. You don't need to make such big pieces. But with this one, I'm actually going to use the stencil. I sprayed it off screen just with water and then put this down onto my little inked background, and this is going to provide some texture as well because, of course, the Distress Oxide inks are water reactive, and so that is a fun technique where we can take away some of the ink. You can also add ink to your stencil and pop that down, and it gives a cool pattern as well. And then I liked it so much I decided to do it for the first one that I did as well. I'm just going in between the original dots that I inked, if that makes sense. And so it's sort of an offset pattern. And then I dab up any extra water with a little paper towel and then take it off. Let it dry. If you want the pattern to really come through, then dab it off so that the ink removes itself. It's just really subtle because I didn't put a heavy layer of ink on there to begin with. Then what we're going to do is start creating some of the gorgeous icing for these cakes. Now for this, I was just looking for some bright colours that I had in my stash. Any paper you could use, or you could use some white cardstock and colour it, of course. I purchased this one. This is the Simple Stories Colour Vibe Brights. There are 24 papers in here, and there's it's a little bit hard to see, but there's sort of dots on one side and plain pattern on the other. And it is surprising how many times you just need either a little bit of pattern or just plain colours. So this is a great one for that if you just need a little bit of bright, gorgeous colour. I'm just going to choose a couple of colours. I need 3, obviously, for my 3 different cakes. So I'm going to go with a yellow, an orange, and then a nice contrasting blue colour. Now, reminding me of colour, I have just used this paper pad in a cool new video that I have on my website, natashafootecreative.com. You can head over there, and I have a whole lot of card making classes. I have a whole lot of exclusive video tutorials and content over there. There are also some freebie things as well, so head on over there for a whole lot more, Natasha. Now, these gorgeous dies here, this is the Plants and Vases by Altenew, and I have used these in quite a few videos. Here's a couple of extra spears. These have some perfect pearls on them, and they are shiny and gorgeous. Now, this is what gave me the idea, because I don't have a stand for my birthday cake, right? I don't have the right dies for it. But what if we were to make one? So this vase here, I'm actually going to ink this up in some hickory smoke. And then when I was inking this up, I thought, how am I going to add just, how am I going to make this a little bit more something? I like to have a shiny element in my cards. I like to have something that catches your eye, the movement in my cards. And I was like, I think maybe I should just emboss this in silver. So the inking was unnecessary, but I am going to use my Versamark sticky embossing ink and then just add some plain silver embossing powder over top. So the inking was not necessary at all, but that's okay. And then if you wanted to, you could also add a couple of layers of embossing powder. That is going to stop any pitting that you might get. Now this vase also has a slight pattern to it that the die creates. So actually it had a little bit of interest to it, and it kind of still looked like the pattern. So I didn't need to go over with the second one. It still looked fine. There was no pitting. But this looked lovely to begin with. Let's let that dry and cut out a few bases. As I said, I'm going to make a few of these cards, so you don't need this much brown. But I also didn't have a size that I was working to, so I really did just sort of cut these down and then hold them up against each other and measure, just what I thought was going to be roughly the right size. So I can't give you measurements here, but just measure with your heart, sort of, figure out a rectangle and then make one slightly smaller and then slightly smaller again. Now, I can also use the scraps here as well as the actual die that it sort of cuts out, if that makes sense. I can use the pieces that were either side of the die cutting, and that's actually going to work well because they have the straight edge up the top anyway. So I will just cut down a smaller piece of each of these. I have got so many ideas in my head for how to create using the border dies, but I also have videos on this channel that if you search border dies, I have used this exact die set, and I showed lots of different ways that you can use it in one video. So you can search that on here as well. Please remember to subscribe to my channel if you're enjoying this content. There are literally more than 1,000 videos on here now, and I absolutely love making the most of what the supplies that we have and what we choose to invest in, choose to purchase, because craft supplies are not cheap, especially not these days. And so we really do want to make the most of it, and we want multiple ways to use things rather than just one or two ideas. And so you will see the same products used over and over again. We do want to make the most of what we already have. Yes, new things are nice and they're fun and they're often inspiring, but also we just need to make sure we use what we have as well. Now, this is where I'm going to make my cake stand. So I cut off the bottom of my vase, and I'm like, that kind of looks like a stand. I feel like the top needs to be a bit wider though. And so I'm going to take the rest of the vase and I'm just going to cut a strip from the center. Now, it was a bit too, my fingers weren't going to reach, so I just add a little bit of mint tape, a little bit of low-tack tape, and then that way I have a handle to move it in and out of the trimmer, and I have a nice thin piece there that I'm going to adhere along the top, and we have just made our cake stand out of things that we already had, in fact, a vase die. So that is going to work out well. I think it looks pretty good, and I don't think anybody would think that we've turned a vase upside down and made it into this. So there's my cake stand ready to go. All of the pieces are coming together. I rounded the corners of the cake just because I felt like it looked a little bit more cakeish. The square edges were just a little too harsh. I have the Simon Says Stamp Sparkling Candles die set here. Now, I did think about making my own candles, and I probably could have, but I think this one was just a little bit easier, honestly. And so, again, I picked out some scraps of paper, but I'm just showing you the paper pad that it came from. This is the Essential Craft Papers Ombre paper pad. There are 40 double-sided sheets in here, so you can see where it came from. I just cut out the candle, and then I also used the blue from the first paper pad, the Colour Vibe one, and that's where I got this colour from. I just wanted, you know, like a light blue and a dark blue that I could layer up, so I would get a blue candle, but there would be some difference given that there was a couple of different layers we could use. Now I'm actually going to cut this down really short because I just need a tiny wee candle to pop out the top, but you could also skip the candle, and if it weren't for a birthday you don't have to have it, but I did have the little flame in some yellow, and then it has the centre there which I will do in yellow in the centre and orange around the outside. It does look like a cute little candle in the end. We could have made it by ourselves, but we're doing pretty well with the cake so far. I was actually really happy with how this cake turned out, and I think it looks just as good as some of the die sets out there for actual cakes. Now, using a good old favourite, this is an old favourite, this is the ModaScrap rectangles, and I have just cut one of these out. Now, just to add like a little bit more, you know, a little bit fancy, I'm actually going to use some mint tape, and I'm going to mask off the edges, add some sticky embossing ink, the Versamark, and then I'm going to pop on some silver embossing powder, and that's just so there is something that matches the cake stand, something else to catch your eye when you, you know, it gives the card some movement when you move the card and when you open it and use it. So I just add some embossing powder around the edges, and then I'm going to melt that in again. Shiny and really nice, very simple, very easy to do, rather than adding a whole matting layer to it. And then, of course, I needed a wee happy birthday sentiment, so this is the Vibrant Sentiments. You know absolutely that this is my go-to set. I've been using this one for a good 6 months or more, and it's one of the only ones I use. That and the Sending Sunshine one for sentiments at the moment. I'm really loving it. Very versatile. It's got every sentiment covered, and so I popped some foam tape on the back of this panel here, and then it is time to assemble. This is my favourite part because you see everything start to come together. I did decide for the bottom cake that I would round off the bottom corners, and then the top ones are just going to tuck ever so slightly into the previous one. Now, something I did decide to do is I decided to do the cake wonky, so to speak. I just think it looked better than the more perfect cake, and it's in fun colours, you know, and the cakes have sort of fun texture, and so I didn't think it was a really serious cake, so I've sort of gone like a bit wonky. I pop a line of glue down the bottom, and that means I can tuck the next layer in up underneath it, if you know what I mean, because I didn't know how far up the cake was going to come, so I didn't want to work from the top down. But yeah, super simple and really fun to put this together. And as I said, I think it actually ends up, you know, working out okay. I quite like the look of it. You can let me know in the comment section down below. And you might think that of a few things that you have in your stash that you would be able to make this with. I mean, by all means, you don't need the border dies to create the icing on the cake. You could just hand draw, you know, hand cut with some little fussy cutting scissors or a big long blade and, you know, do some wiggles. Just like you were cutting out a nice, you know, snowdrift, but make it a bit more wigglier. You could absolutely do this without any dies as well. So just know that there is always another way that you can do this, absolutely. And of course, if you like my Natasha content, then you can subscribe here, but also come and visit me at natashafootecreative.com. There will be a link at the end of this video, as well as any supplies used. I always link them down below because I get lots of questions and people just want to check them out and see what I've used. So they're all down there if you'd like to see them as well. Anyhow, thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.